Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a first submission of a horse named Bebe by her owner Beth. Beth is a rider who's returning to the sport after being away from some time. She wrote a very nice letter in which she talks about the experience that we've seen so many times, that she was trying to be a rider as a young person and ran into that wall of not enough education to know what to do with the horses that she had at her disposal, and became frustrated with it and eventually went to college and this sort of thing. But now she's come back. Her own daughter is riding, and they decided that it would be cheaper and better to buy a horse and train it than to take lessons. And I think you're exactly right, and I think you've done just the right thing. This horse is 9 years old, which is not at all an old horse. We should consider that a horse just coming into prime years instead of one that's wasted the way so many people think of today. But 9 should be it's really a very young horse, really, think of it that way. I mean, horses really only mature at 7, 8, that they're fully mature. So, 9 is not an old horse, so we shouldn't be thinking of it that way. But of course, that is the problem, is that, people do so much with horses before they're mature, and that's what destroys them. But this one looks like a good candidate. I think you've made a nice choice here. The horse is very calm, she says, and that's a very good thing to start with. Better lazy than crazy for most people, anyway. The crazy ones take a really long time before they really come around. So, having watched this video, the biggest question is, are you on the right track here? And I would say very much so. So everything I've seen here is very good. And you're very right to just keep it to the walk work. And I got to emphasize that to people. There's really just, if the trot is bad, there's no point in trotting. Just walk until the walk is good enough. And as you see here, you don't do much trot, but when you do, the horse starts right away into a stretch. So I do think you are ready to start trotting this horse from what I've seen here. Certainly trying it and seeing if the horse will stay there. But you'll also see the importance of just the way you go about it here. You do so much work in the work in hand. By the time you get to the lunging, the horse is nice and stretched out and already stretching into the contact, and that's exactly what we want to have happen. So all you really need to do is just keep doing what you're doing, and you're going to get there. So good work here. This looks like it really is going to be a nice horse for you, especially if your daughter is also riding this horse. You just want to be sure when we're working with children that they're working with safe horses that have many years of training. And it's fun to train one along with them. It's just what I did as a child. I trained many horses with my father from the time I was as young as I can possibly remember. We were always out working horses. So it's a great thing to do, and a great way of doing something together with your children that you both enjoy, that if you do it like this, will make your children better people. So think about that. So all good. So this looks like it's really going to be a nice horse. I love thoroughbred horses. I grew up riding them and training them, and have ridden many of them to the highest levels. And so there's nothing, we must get out of that idea that you have to have the $1 million horse. In fact, if you look at some of the greatest riders of the last 30 years or so, many of them were riding horses that were not expensive at all, like Klaus Bachenhall. The people that are real riders, can make a good dressage horse out of a nice, reasonable horse. So. And that's what you seem to have here, so I don't see any reason that would stop you from moving forward. If you can develop the horse to a high enough level, I mean, I've said, if you look at our little horse, perhaps she's no better a mover than what you have here. She's a half thoroughbred, and look how beautifully she's doing, and still at 20 years old, and she's trained through Grand Prix. She's competed through I1 very successfully. Karen won her silver medal on. As I said, she's no more of a horse than what you have right here. So, and of course, happily, we hope that as time goes on here, that judges do begin to recognize, and we do at least see people talking about everything we're doing here. I'm seeing every time I open a magazine now, it's somebody talking about stretching, and unfortunately, some of those articles don't seem to be written by people who actually seem to know what they're talking about. But at least they're talking about it, and that's a step in the right direction. As people gain more experience, hopefully many of them that are talking about it will become better at actually doing it. So, and that includes everybody around us. So I just hope to someday see a world where I come out and this is what everybody's doing out with their horses, and how nice would that be? So I encourage everyone to try to do this and keep learning if you're not quite, getting there. And that's what this site is for, so people can get on here and get an education and see other people struggling through the same process. But, once you realize, the only struggle is to get the horse to stretch a little bit, and once you get past that, everything else is just waiting for them to develop. So And then, and of course that should all be fun. The process should be fun all the way around, all the way along. It's not like you just grind the horse and grind the horse trying to make it into a Grand Prix horse, which is, of course, the fate of so many horses today. And of course, once we launch the World Dressage Federation, which we will be doing before too long, websites are all being worked on. It is happening. We've been filming the dressage test recently, which hopefully I'll have time to get them all filmed, at least the first level of them, before I leave on my next trip, so I can begin to get these up there and out for people to begin riding. So I've tried to take a much more progressive view of how tests are written in the new test that I've written for the World Dressage Federation, that more mirror really how we train. So I'm looking forward to beginning to get those out there, which will be before too long. So here we see the horse beginning to slow down again, and that's the danger of doing too much, is that you'll kind of forget about it, because you're going to get tired too. But I really applaud how long you're capable of doing this, and once again, it's great for the horse. But here it's getting a little bit on the slow side. So here we need to encourage a little more activity. And that's always something to think about when we're training horses. Like, when did I get that optimal moment? So as I always say, I like to get that optimal moment. Then when I feel like the horse is trying to drop out of that optimal moment, that is the optimal stride, where they're working over the back the best they can. In other words, they're giving me what they can for the day. As soon as I feel them starting to flag a little bit, I'm going to send them on for a moment longer, and then I'm going to stop, because I never want to exhaust the horse. Remember, that's not what training is at all. It's not about exhausting horses. When we exhaust them, just like with people, exhausted athletes are the ones who get injured. Well, the same thing happens with horses. That they get exhausted and they get sloppy, and they hit a little soft spot, and they weren't quite ready. They weren't over their back enough, and boom, you've got a pulled tendon or something. So it's really important to quit before exhaustion sets in. Always bearing that in mind, that we're trying to have some empathy for the horse and read the horse. That's what makes this interesting every day, is to come out and feel, well, what can I do today? How much horses have I got left here? How much back do I have? It takes a very, very long time, and really it isn't at all just like a Grand Prix jumper. If you tried to jump Grand Prix fences every day, your horse, would be destroyed in no time at all. Of course, that is what people are doing in the jumper world today, is they're mostly coming out and just jumping and jumping and jumping until these horses are dead, and buying other ones, But if you look at how people used to train horses, good jumper riders don't jump very much. They do a lot of flat work. Really, anybody who knows what they're doing will tell you that jumping is all about getting to the fence in the right frame, in the right stride. The rest is easy. That is going over the fence if you've arrived there with the horse over its back and at the right stride to let the horse jump the kind of fence that you're jumping. And that's really all there is to it. Everything becomes so simplified. Just like the dressage work on the flat work, once you realize it's all about having the horse over the back. If it's not over the back, you wouldn't want to do it. The same is true of jumping. You don't want to jump hollow horses. That's why so many people are getting injured and crushed these days, because when most horses that jump hollow are jumping out of fear. They're jumping because they're afraid to do anything else, and most cases they've been forced over fences. So once they get in front of a fence that they shouldn't jump, and they try to jump it anyway, and ended up in the middle of it and flipping over on somebody. As I've said many times, I've never seen anybody who was riding a horse over the back actually get hurt on a horse, ever. So something to think about there. And that includes all the hunting that I've done in my life, as well as the jumping and 3-day eventing. Watch Michael Young go cross country. It looks effortless. He's not pulling on the reins. He doesn't do a lot of jerking back. He just arrives at the fence and jumps it because the horse is over its back. That's how it should be done safely, as well as any other kind of jumping, or even riding on the flat. So that was really good. I love how it got even stretchier there as you went. It's getting longer and deeper. And once again, I applaud your patience to come out and do this for this length of time, because once again, there's plenty of horse left. This is harder. When it comes to this walking bit, it's harder on us than it is on the horses in many cases. I have a blister on the top of my toes right now from wearing an ill-fitting pair of boots while lunging, so I know how that is. Trying to lunge today was quite difficult. So it's best that we all stay sound all of the time, us and the horses. And I hope some of you have, I know you are, because I've seen the responses out there, but I'm very excited about everybody who has joined our jump rope challenge out there in the world, because I think it's really going to help riders. I've been amazed at myself at how much just a couple of weeks of doing that, how much better I actually, and I'm a pretty fit person, but it's got me feeling much better in the saddle. I mean, as you get older, we're constantly fighting that, your body's trying to go back into the ground, so to speak. So getting our posture straightened out and our back straightened out and that sort of thing make a big, big difference. And that's what this jumping rope seems to do. I'm going to do another video in a day or so here to show you some more about technique. But back to your technique here, this all looks very good. Once again, I'm not seeing anything to really make much comment about in this part, is that other than you're doing it really well. Every time he slows down, you seem to get him a little more active and a little deeper into the stretch, and that's just what you want to do. And the horse looks very relaxed. And the horse can do this for hours, I say it's kind of funny. And think about what you're doing here. Think about all the people in the world today who poo-poo what we do, yet almost every one of them owns a European hot walker, and they put them in those European hot walkers and walk them with their neck stretched out. And they all rave about how fantastic the European hot walkers are. Well, those hot walkers are the best training those horses ever get, because at least they're allowed to walk. And you know how so many jumper people these days, they really don't do anything. They get on, they walk for 2 seconds, and they start cantering, and that's the horses warm up, and they start going over fences. And they wonder why they all break down. No, I don't think they even wonder why. I don't think they care. That's what it comes down to. Maybe some of the clients would if they knew what was going on. But this is just really good. And as I said, just kind of think of it. This is exactly kind of what you're doing, is walking the horse around on a European hot walker. I don't like those hot walkers. I don't use them because I think they're kind of a lazy man's approach to training horses. But as I said, for most of the horses these days who are put on there, that's the best training that they get. So, if you're riding your horse is hollow, well, use one of those. At least the horse has a few moments in its life when it's not going around hollow in the back. So those are very good. But but I do think that it's much better to work horses correctly, because I do think the European hot walkers thing is kind of numb the horses out. They just kind of get in the a trance-like state walking around there, and they can become very dull doing that, I've noticed. So that's one thing to be care of. And even with this, that we don't do so much of this that we bore the horse to death with it. But as long as you keep asking to move forward, and I notice you still have the shambone on, and that's perfectly fine. I would leave that on this horse for a while. Thoroughbreds are really usually the horses, thoroughbreds, Arabs, horses that have been upside down for years and years and years. Usually the shambone is the best bet, or horses that have been overflexed in the neck, because of course with side reins, when we put side reins on a horse that's been overflexed, the neck just overflexes and there you are. So even if they come down with their neck, they're usually behind the bridle. So the shambone is a better bet for any horse that's been overflexed in the neck, or use nothing at all on them to get them to till their neck is out there long enough that it heals. So keeping the shambone on here, I think is the right choice to make. This doesn't it's not in your way. It doesn't hurt anything. And, you can ride in a shambone as long as the shambone is not really long, and you can put some of them come with a neck strap that goes around that keeps them up. But you wouldn't want to ride in one that then reins, get really long out in front of you, that a horse could possibly step in them. So if you're going to ride in a shambone, it's perfectly fine to do, but you should ride there should be a neck strap around the neck that connects to keep it up, just in case a horse might step into it. It's not something I do a lot of, and I wouldn't do it outside the ring, certainly in somewhere where it's, and you'd never want it to be too tight, which yours is not too tight here, of course. But we always have to remember that when we ride horses, anything that may restrict its ability to bring its head up in the air can stop it, can actually make it fall. So that's why we never want to have anything tight on the horse, even tight reins. If you don't let go and the horse starts to fall, and you don't let go of the reins, it will come down on top of you, which is, of course, also what happens. I got on a site a couple of days ago that just happened to pop up, and it was, horse falls. It was one of those things, a compilation of many, many horse falls. In every case on that entire thing, you could see the fall coming. You could see the person riding down there with the horse completely hollow. The horse either try to stop or try to jump from a wrong spot and end up in the middle and flip over on top of the people. Interesting things to watch now that you have the experience that you all have and the knowledge that you have. Go and watch some of those kind of things, and you can just see it coming. You can literally project which falls are going to happen when you see the horse, sucking back and the rider working, trying to make the horse go. I mean, there comes a point if you're making horses do things where, it's not going to work. If they get really afraid, or they're going to, as I say, like in the jumping situation, they're going to jump something they shouldn't jump, and you're going to have a problem. But this is exactly how you want horses to develop calmly, right from the very beginning. And as I said, you're lucky here that this is a calm horse. So at least you're starting from there. With the calm ones, and that's the other thing to realize, is a horse calm or is it footsore, for instance, and doesn't want to move, Generally speaking, especially if it's a thoroughbred horse, if it doesn't want to move at all, I guarantee you there's something wrong with it. And I could say that almost any horse, even if that's even, a lot of the heavier kind of horses, they get so heavy they don't want to move. Just like a person, they get past a certain point of overweightness and they just don't want to go anywhere. So, that's still just as much as something wrong with the horse as having sore feet. So just because a horse doesn't have sore feet, and it's overweight, doesn't mean you can just push it and push it and push it. You have to do, we never want to feel like we're forcing the horse to do anything, even if that's just to walk. So with a horse like that, you would just start off very, very slowly. You have to start very slowly. Take them on long, long walks until they start to regain some, just like a person, a person who's overweight and is, 200 pounds overweight, you can't take them to the gym and throw them on the treadmill. You have to start off very, very slowly. And of course, diet is a big part of that as well. So being sure that we're not overfeeding. But at the same time, we can't starve weight off of horses either. That doesn't work, to suddenly put them on a crash diet the way humans would do. This all has to be done, over a period of time because we don't want to starve them. So slowing down the level that they eat. We have a few of these horses that gain weight very easily due to the fact that they're IR, for instance, Zoolander. And the owner found a very great little thing for that horse that is like a round feeder thing that just goes on the floor and the feed goes in it and another top goes on it, and the horse has to pull the hay up out of this and the top slowly goes down as it eats, and it slows him down. And there's a lot of horses just, it's amazing. Some of them can put away a blake of hay in 10 minutes. So those kind of horses tend to go to fat very quickly. So great way of finding a way of slowing them down. Of course, whenever we're keeping horses inside, it's always that issue of, they have nothing to do all day, so we want them to eat all day, but on the other hand, they're not moving and their necks aren't down, so we have that issue to deal with as well. So getting them out of those stalls as much of the day as we can is always a good thing to do if they are living in 12 by 12s. So once again, this all just looks really relaxed. Now it's a little too slow here again. That's the only issue here, is just sometimes you get a little bit too slow, and other than that, but you've already been walking out here for almost 20 minutes, so I applaud your ability to keep this going. But now you can see how this is kind of slowing down to the crawl there a little bit. And it starts to speed up again. So that's what I would say to you, is just in the course of all this, just be sure you're not getting to the point where the horse is just, you're doing so much of this that the horse is just kind of getting bored with it and getting too slow. But I like the stretch that you got right there. I mean, it looks like if you just asked them to be a little more active, it would be. So I think that's all. Maybe you lost focus a little bit. And that's always the hardest thing in all things, to keep our focus on what we're doing. I try to keep a metronome going in my head. Being a musician myself, maybe it's easier for me. But, I'm always looking to lock into that perfect rhythm in everything that I do. Find the right position over the back and then find the right speed, and then you try to maintain it. You can't always. I mean, you're always going to lose it occasionally, but that's our goal. Once again, the changes of rhythm are what tell us how correctly the horse is working. In other words, is it continuing to work over its back? And once again here, just a little bit slow, but now we're going on to the lunge line. But you can see here, though, that after all that work in hand you've done, you get on the lunge line, and now the horse is really stretching out quite nicely. So that's exactly what you would like to do, because you'd like to be able to warm the horse up in the walk without it coming out and, having to run around like a lunatic, and that sort of thing. Once again, that's also why, we never want to pre-exhaust horses before they work them, the way we see some people doing, where they take horses out of stalls and run them around in a loose ring, for a long time. That is really counterproductive to training, because then by the time you get to the training, the horse is already done. He's had his playtime. We want training to be playtime. So if you're going to turn horses out, if they live in stalls, now if they live outside, that's a different story. They live outside all the time, all good. I wish every horse could live outside all the time. But that's not always possible, certainly not where we live here, because there's just nowhere for them to live outside since we live in a desert here. So we have the best sort of thing we can for this sort of climate is that we have in and outs for our horses, so they all have a nice big run as well as they have a stall to go in. So they have a pretty lot of freedom to move around a little bit, relatively speaking, and then they come out and they have their exercise every day. Just like a person, you only need to exercise, a bit a day. 30 minutes to an hour a day, if you've never worked out, is actually a lot, and it's all it takes. If you ever watch horses at the racetrack, for instance, it takes about 10 or 15 minutes is about how long horses are out on the track. They come out and they trot in one direction, they do a little breeze, and they're finished. If they've done it correctly, that's all there is to it. So same thing here, unless you're training for endurance, which most of us are not doing anymore. I'm kind of happy to say, however, because, the endurance thing, unless you really know what you're doing, it is very difficult to keep horses over their backs. And it used to be why we saw so many sort of bad event horses, for instance, because to get them fit enough to do what we used to have to do in eventing, you would have to have them pretty hyper fit. And if you didn't know what you're doing in the dressage, that would tend to stiffen them. But it's interesting today, at the last Olympic Games, the dressage of the 3-day event was way better than any of the dressage that went on in the so-called dressage ring. So we seem to have had a change there. But of course, event riders, if they came out riding, if you tried to ride an event horse the way we see dressage horses being ridden today, you wouldn't make it around the course. Look how nice and loose this is getting. So I really just love this. And once again, because you did so much work there before you started doing this, that now you're just able to move out and be a little further from the horse, and you're still keeping a nice active swing in the walk, exactly what you want to have happen. So it's so simple once you understand this. I do think this horse is ready now to begin thinking about trotting. So, in your next submission, hopefully we'll see that. I think you are already doing some trot. But it certainly looks like to me it's ready to go. So if you put the horse into the trot from here, if it didn't stay in the stretch, within a few moments, they don't always come right into the stretch. Sometimes we have to give them a few moments to get there. But, if it hasn't come there within, a few minutes and the horse is still running around hollow, then you just want to come back to the walk. And just know that it will get the job done. The same thing with the canter. If you have a horse with a bad canter, don't canter. If you do the trot work right, one day you'll just start the canter and you'll have a miraculously good canter. But as I said, if we try to work our way through these things, the more canter that you do bad, that's the best way in the world to ruin your horse's legs is to canter a horse hollow, because, of course, the faster you go, the concussion on the legs is much greater. They say at a full gallop, a horse has 5,000 pounds per square inch of pressure on its front feet. So now it's nothing like that, in a dressage ring, but it's still a great deal, and that's once again, we don't want to do any of that work without the shock absorbers on, just like you don't want to drive your car around without shock absorbers. If you've ever been in an old car with no shocks, well, that's what's happening to a horse's body when they don't have their shock absorbers on, which is the top line, which enables them, once again, to sink in their hips a little bit, just like you and I. When we bend our knees and bend our hips, we can run for a long period of time without stress on our legs, and that's exactly what we want the horse to do. It's as simple as that. But of course, unlike us, the horse has to combine two ends, and has to do that by lifting its back up, once again, so that that thrust can continue through the back. The horse is backing around. Even in the walk, we see how when the horse takes that step off, when it's right, it pushes up, and you almost see that wave move through the back of the horse. That's what you're looking for. And that wave gets greater and greater. And once again, as the horse develops, it really feels like a wave. It's just like surfing. It makes it easy to sit to the trot because the horse is the inertia moving through the horse and through the lifted back lifts you right up and allows you to sit like you're sitting on a cloud. Now, if you sit on your horse and it feels like a pile driver, I guarantee you the horse is not over its back. Now, sadly, what's happened today, if you take these horses that have really good back ends and a lot of ability to flex and they slow them down, they're sinking in the back, but it gives people an impression of softness because really they're not even trotting. They're just kind of jogging along, and the horse is kind of dropping its joints a little bit, which is what gives you that kind of phony, passage-y kind of feel on the back of a horse. But it's dropping its back out from underneath you instead of lifting you up and supporting. In that kind of way, you know, it's like that Tennessee Walker thing. You know, you feel like nothing is moving underneath you because there's no real moment of suspension. A hollow horse is not pushing off the ground. So there's really not a moment of suspension, which is what all gaited horses do. They have 3 feet on the ground all the time, so only 1 foot is lifting. It's just doing it very, very quickly, or, you know, um, and that's what, for instance, the walking gait is. It's a 4-beat gait that's very fast but hollow in the back. So the horse is never really lifting up. It's just pulling all with his shoulders. You'll notice that all gaited horses have huge undersides of their necks, and that's because they spend their whole life pulling with their shoulders so that some person can sit like they're in a hammock behind them and they don't feel anything. But of course, if you have to actually go anywhere on a horse that was moving like that, you wouldn't get very far. But of course, that's also why this, we lost all this knowledge, is because people suddenly weren't doing anything but riding around show rings with horses. They weren't going out and regularly going on 20-mile gallops, or 20-mile rides. So actually, when you think about how little horses are doing these days, many of them, in terms of all they're doing is riding many times, in rings with perfect footing, and yet they're all going lame. So, this should be a big indication for people, like, and we see people are spinning their wheels. I mean, they're spending fortunes on footing and then turning over their beautiful horse to somebody who rides them upside down. And even with the beautiful footing, they still bow their tendons and suspensories and all this kind of thing. So this is getting a little slow here, but really deep in the stretch. So I'm really looking forward. This horse looks like, to me, like he's ready to move up into the trot work, which I think you're ready to do, and you can send on your next video. But that's really good, like it gets there. Now, it could be swinging a little bit more, but I love the looseness that the horse gets when it gets in that position. So from there, you should be able to just move right up into the trot. And as I said, if he doesn't go into the stretch within a few circles, 5, 6, something like that, a minute, then I'd put him right back in the walk and do this again. And you can even try again within the same day. But as loose as this horse is getting, I don't think it will be long before you'll have a decent trot, if you don't have one already. Really good there. And that's exactly how you would like your mounted walk to look, like that, long, stretched all the way down. I guess because, I grew up, I never rode in a ring except at horse shows when I was a kid. We didn't have rings. A lot of people in hunt country don't have rings. And I grew up even in my first big jobs training horses in fields and things, because I said a lot of hunt people did not believe in having riding arenas. And really, it was never a problem. My father taught me right in the very beginning. One of the first thing is that horses always, when we're riding them out, they always have to have their heads down so they see where they're going and what they're stepping into, which makes sense to me, because if you see how a horse will do it, it wants to look at something close to the ground, it will put its head down there close to it. Remember, horses have no lens in their eyes, so they adjust how the light is refracting into their eye. Their eyeball is rather oblong, so that's why when they lift their head up, that lets the light in at a different angle. So that's why when horses get excited, their heads go up in there, because they're really trying to see off in a distance to see what's coming at them. So that's why it takes a lot of trust in the horse not to want to do that, because it's very natural for the horse if it doesn't, if you're not the one it trusts, if it's not taking its cues from you, then it's just out there kind of loose in the wind, so to speak, deciding for itself. And when it feels some danger coming, it's going to want to put its head up so it can see what's coming. If it trusts us, then it doesn't bother. But that's very different than a horse who's been forced to hold its head down with draw reins or whatever the case may be. I mean, in fact, I want my horse, just like with jumping. If I don't think my horse can jump the fence, I don't want it to try. If my horse thinks there's something really of danger out there and he puts his head up, I'm going to go look. Is there a rattlesnake in the trail? And I've heard of that happening many times. So, it's a two-way street when they really trust us. But great job here for your first submission. I think you've done a wonderful job with this horse. I think it is exactly what you want for yourself and your daughter. I think it's going to turn into a beautiful horse for you. And I look forward to seeing, as I said, you should be able to step pretty much right from here up into the trot, and I believe the horse is ready to do that, as long as the horse will stay there in that stretch. If it doesn't, then you just come back to the walk. It's as simple as that. But you've done a great job here so far, and I really look forward to seeing where you get to with this horse. That should be really up to you. Keep working it and you'll get there. 9 years old is not an old horse. So great work today. Look forward to seeing you soon.